Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross, in the studio. And joining me via Skype tonight is Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign. We hope to be joined later on by Day Tucker, our rural correspondent. We're having some technical difficulties with her line just now. So we're going to carry on, just you and me, Sam, for the moment. First of all, as usual, the coronavirus update. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 233,535 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres. And of these, 215,365 were confirmed negative. 18,170 were positive. There are 14 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There are also 0 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 515 were in hospital last night, 9 of whom were in intensive care, plus 6 more people in intensive care with suspected COVID-19. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infections has sadly risen to 2,472. Now, this number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 42,647 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 15. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And now to our first and major story this evening. The Economic Recovery Advisory Group report has been published. The Economy Secretary, Fiona Hislop, has welcomed the recommendations of the Advisory Group on Economic Recovery. The group, led by Benny Higgins, was tasked with recommending solutions to ensure transition towards a greener, net zero wellbeing economy and to advise on measures to address the different challenges the economy will face as Scotland recovers from the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The group's 25 recommendations, which will now be considered in detail by the Scottish Government and its partners, include an urgent need to access low-cost debt, requires an accelerated review of the fiscal framework, and a significant increase in access to capital investment to support an investment-led recovery. A Scottish Jobs Guarantee, in partnership with business and government, should be introduced to address unemployment, with a refocused skills strategies and decisive steps to align teaching and learning in universities and colleges to the needs of business. The prioritisation of sector plans to deliver a green recovery, where the coincidence of emissions reductions, the development of natural capital and job creation are the strongest. Also, critical investment in the country's digital infrastructure to improve connectivity, to reduce inequalities and to build the country's resilience. Urgent actions also required to develop a stronger relationship between business and government on the strategy for Scotland's economic recovery. Benny Higgins, the chair of the Advisory Group on Economic Recovery, said, "Scotland faces an economic challenge of monumental scale. If we don't intervene radically to transform our economy, inequalities will drastically widen, with long-term scarring for communities across the country, and for our young people in particular. This cannot be allowed to happen." Now, this is, I think, Sam, it's fair to say, a very serious report, and it is looking at ways in which the government will be able to bring us out of the COVID-19 pandemic and hopefully on a new direction. And I know that you and I at least share an interest in green matters. But first of all, I think let's take the first part of this. They were saying that we need access to low-cost debt. Now, that usually means government borrowing. What do you think the chances are of the Scottish Government succeeding in persuading the British Government to borrow more money on our behalf?
I think unless we're independent, it's not going to happen, Gordon, and that's the kind of bottom line of my opinion in this one when it comes to that. Because if we are given more powers to be able to borrow, that gives Westminster less control over Scotland and how we do business. And as we know, Westminster likes to be able to control all that, which is a shame because we could flourish if we had more control. Me and you do share our kind of green ideas for investment and things, and taking the kind of positive out of the pandemic. I don't know about you, Gordon, but I look at it as an opportunity that we can build a country what we want for the future, rather than carrying on with the same old. If we carry on with the same old, we're going to end up with the same result. So it's looking into investing into the future. And what I would like to, I don't know about you, but what I would like to see is investing more into skills and training.
That's an interesting point. Actually, we'll come to that just shortly when I go back to having a look in the report's details. They said they're looking for low-cost debt. So the Scottish Government is looking for the ability to borrow more money. And I think the figure I heard mentioned, and I don't quote me on this, was around about 4% of what's been spent nationally across the UK. It came out at I think it was approximately, and I'll get pelters for this, about 4% of gross domestic product. I think it corresponded to several billion pounds.
Yeah.
About 6 billion, I think. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, does it, Sam, when you say it quickly like that, considering the huge amounts that...
It sounds like a big figure, but it's not really in terms of a country's economy. But as they say, every penny counts, doesn't it? And it all kind of helps, as long as it's being invested properly and we're able to borrow it, and we don't kind of flutter it away, so to speak. Even a pound can be invested properly if you know what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? And put a bit of common sense behind it.
What kind of industry, Sam, do you think you would like to see the Scottish Government?
What I would like, crikey, now you've got me there, Gordon, because I love the arts and crafts. I love to see innovation. I love to see creativity. And that's something that we're really good at in Scotland, naturally. And I would love to see more investment into that side of things. Another thing that we're really good at is tourism. And the part of tourism which we are really good at, that I think we should invest more at, is more like living museums. Where people can actually go and, see the past in front of their eyes. I would love to see more of that. And like that, I mean, that can tie in with creativity, skills, apprenticeships and things. You can tie that right into that, going back to,
of course,
and education as well, and that's something we could do as a country. We see patches of it in certain parts of the country being really successful. So I would like to see that grow, which would grow jobs, it would grow training, it would grow education, it would grow in terms of tourism. So that's one of the it's not one industry I would like to see grown, it's a kind of group of industries.
Yeah, Sam, what's your opinion of investing more in, for example, renewable energy, wind turbines, onshore, offshore?
Definitely,
You're broadly in favour?
It's all about being able to, being able to grow the country with what we want, and renewable energy, definitely. One of the other things I would like to see is public transport being more accessible, because one of the things that we have in Scotland, with our geographical kind of area, it's some parts of Scotland are inaccessible for people who don't have a private car.
Indeed,
if we were to grow and invest in our public transport, this is something which again would then encourage people to leave their private cars behind, which again affects the emissions. So this is one of the things that we've spoken about in great detail with Save Loch Lomond, is getting public transport, more investment, getting it all kind of being able to join up, because you can get a train from Glasgow to Ballach, but once you get to Ballach, you can't exactly go any further.
So you're saying we really need a more joined up approach, as well as focusing more on these green technologies.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
Yep. There's Now, people are obviously a little bit worried at the moment about using public transport, particularly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. How much do you think this is going to slow down progress in the development of new green public transport? Is it going to have a major effect on it?
Yeah, I think it will. I think we'd be kind of naive to say it would, because before, where I would quite happily jump on a train, I'm a bit more wary now. But that will all come with confidence as we learn more about the virus. We need to learn more about the virus. We need to have more, as people start to wear more facial coverings, we get more confident about going back out again, coming out of lockdown. I think that, people using public transport, the confidence will grow again. Well, but yeah, it will take a wee while. Basically, it's all about confidence.
One of the other things, Sam, which I think COVID-19 and the lockdown has shown us, is that many more people are actually capable of working from home. And one of the urgent actions that the author of this, Mr. Higgins, has written is saying that urgent action is needed to develop the country's digital infrastructure so that people who do live miles and miles away out in the countryside can still connect and do business.
Exactly. And this is one of the things with COVID that's shown that we are more capable of working from home than what we would normally be able to do, and we believed that we could do. And yes, we do need to invest in our technologies and networks. And this is another industry that does need to be supported and invested in. And again, providing jobs. And it does allow people to work from home. And again, as someone who works from home and who is a mum, this is something that I've been used to doing for many years anyway. And there is a lot of well-being, health benefits from working from home, especially when you've got children. You tend to, you're there for them, especially it's easier if they've got a sick day from school and things because you're already here.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, that has its negative sides, especially when your friends come for a coffee because they think you're at home and they think you're
not doing anything.
And you end up getting distracted. But that's about being strict and saying people know I may be at home, but I'm working. Unless it's an emergency, I am working. But but it does have its. The only thing that's happened, one of the it's not the only thing, but one of the things that's shown regarding coronavirus, the pandemic, we working from home, is people's electricity bills have went up.
That's an interesting point, Sam.
They're not, because where they would be, leaving the house at whatever time in the morning, not coming back into at night and everything's sitting turned off. Now, people are paying out more money for their fuel bills, their energy bills.
Yes.
So that needs to be looked at as well to support people, because there's no point getting people to work from home if they can't afford to work from home.
Indeed.
In terms of being able to pay for the extra electricity, the extra gas, upgrade their internet, all these things. These are things that go hand in hand with working from home. So this is something that's got to be looked at as well to encourage people to work from home.
I noticed, Sam, that at the end of Mr. Higgins' report, he emphasises very strongly his fears for the long-term scarring on our communities across the country. And as he says, and for our young people in particular, I mean, as a mum yourself, you must be concerned about the future of your own children after the virus is over with and we come out the other side. What are your fears for your own children, Sam?
Probably the same as any other parent, including yourself, Gordon. We always worry about our kids' futures. And even when the future looks rosy as parents, we're always worrying. We're constantly worrying. My biggest fear at the moment, not so much for my older children, but for my youngest, is about social contact. How he's going to come out the other end of this in terms of being socialising, in terms of being able to interact with people face to face, and how that's going to change. And also, but apart from that, obviously jobs and things in the economy. But my biggest fear is how young people are going to come out in terms of their mental health.
Okay.
I think that's going to be a big impact.
Right.
And that will also have an impact on the economy as well, because at the end of the day, all these things do, they've got a butterfly effect. So yeah, that's my concern,
All
is
right.
the mental health and well-being of the young ones.
Thank you, Sam. That's a good point to end on in this story. Now, of course, one of the things about this report is it highlights the fact that Scotland desperately really needs to be independent in order to put all of these things in place. You mentioned this earlier on, the importance of independence for Scotland to be able to put these requirements into force. How is it going to be possible, do you think, for us to get that independence in time? I mean, we have little time, I think, before the end of the pandemic and the end of the transition period. Can we get there in time, do you think?
I would like to think so. I always like to be positive about this. I would like to think so. The problem is convincing those who are still on the fence. With the pandemic, more and more people are coming round to the idea of independence.
Yeah.
And
of course, the poll figures are very healthy at the moment, Sam.
Yes,
a recent poll is showing 54% in favour of independence, the highest it's ever been.
Yeah, even talking to people who would have, before the pandemic, would have said definitely no independence, but now, because they've seen how the Scottish Government have dealt with it, and what they're now realising is, if we can do what we have done with limited control, what could we do if we had full control, especially over our economics and things, without having to ask Westminster for permission for everything.
Sam, if I could interrupt just for a moment, there was another very interesting statistic in this panel-based poll, which I just wanted to mention to you just now, and that was the numbers of ex-no voters, people who voted no in 2014 who have now changed their minds. And according to the poll, 21% of no voters have now changed their minds that would vote yes.
Yeah.
That's an amazing turnaround, surely.
It's amazing. It is. I mean, that is absolutely amazing, and I can quite believe that, and I can quite believe it's actually more than that.
It is in some circumstances.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I would definitely, one of the things I would say, in order to be an independent, I've always had a great belief that if you want to be something, you behave accordingly. So if you want to be an independent country, you start behaving like an independent country, and and then basically, it's...
You raise the expectation, Sam, by behaving that way.
Yes,
and of course, this is precisely what the First Minister has been doing, isn't it, for the last few months?
That's exactly what she's been doing through the pandemic, and that is putting more confidence in people about being independent, and that's what's doing it. If you want to be independent, you behave as if you're independent.
Exactly. One of the other interesting things, Sam, we talked about young people's attitudes to independence just a few moments ago. The figures in the panel-based poll for young people in the two youngest age groups that they looked at was that support for independence there was about 63%, which is a remarkable level for independence to be at in any demographic at the moment, you would think, wouldn't you?
Well, the thing is, Gordon, our youngsters are very politically aware, more so than when we were at school.
They're smarter too, Sam, I think.
Yeah, and that again comes down to the internet and how they use. I mean, we use social media, we use the internet, but the young ones are kind of way ahead of us, and they know how to access information, and they are very savvy in how to access information, and they're very much more politically aware, and that shows, with the polls. And I know my 8-year-old, I mean, he could turn around and have when he really wants to, when he gets his political hat on, he can sit and have a right good wee conversation regarding independence and the importance of what it means to him. And if you go to any of the independence marches, you will see young kids there, and
Yes, I
they will
noticed
be
that.
able
Yeah,
to tell you that
I was
they
at a
won't
march in
attend
Inverness just before Christmas, and I noticed a huge number of young people. I was very surprised at the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam, we're going to move on from this story to our next one now, which is a warning. And that's a warning against a damaging return to Tory austerity. The SNP has warned against a damaging return to Tory austerity cuts after growing reports that the Chancellor is drawing up plans for cuts to public spending. Responding to the latest reports in today's Financial Times, Alison Thewlish MP said that the UK government must rule out cuts and instead introduce a major coronavirus recovery package and devolve financial powers to the Scottish Parliament to stimulate the economy and to secure a strong recovery. The SNP Shadow Chancellor said that the threat of Tory public spending cuts is underlining the need for Scotland to have its own financial powers to ensure that a tailored response that meets Scotland's needs and prevents job losses and budget cuts. So Sam, just what we were talking about a few moments ago, that Scotland needs the ability to control its own finances. And here is Alison Thewlish asking Rishi Sunak to consider allowing Scotland to do this. Again, do you think there is any chance at all that Mr Sunak will look favourably upon this particular request?
No, I don't think he will, because the thing is, that's where they've got us, really. And the thing is, the Tories will use this to their advantage in terms of the cuts and things, and they know that it hurts. They're aware of the damage it does, and they know of the damage, but they quite blatantly they don't care as long as certain percentage of the population, which is a very small percentage, is making money and they are protected. I think the only way we're going to get any control is being independent. I don't think we're going to get any other way. Asking Westminster nicely and asking the Chancellor nicely is not going to work, basically.
Okay, well listen, Sam, I'm going to move to the next subject, and that is the leaving of the lockdown. And we are now into phase 2 from today, and this is the new measures being introduced, I beg your pardon, under phase 2. And those new releases that are being made available from today. And those are indoor and non-office workplaces, including factories, warehouses and laboratories, can resume once the relevant guidance has been implemented. This doesn't include non-essential office, call centre, culture, leisure or hospitality premises. Restrictions on house moves have also been relaxed. Public gardens and zoos can open, but should remain limited to local access only in this phase. Outdoor sports courts are to reopen, and playgrounds can also reopen. Registration offices can open for priority tasks. Marriages and civil partnerships will be allowed with minimal attendees outside. And street access retail shops can reopen once guidance is implemented. Interiors of shopping malls and shopping centres will remain closed for non-essential shops until we reach phase 3. There's also the reintroduction of some chronic disease management, the phased resumption of some screening services, the phased safe resumption of essential optometry and ophthalmology services, and outdoor markets can reopen once guidance is implemented. Now, these are all the things now, Sam, from today, which we are allowed to do. Now, out of this great enormous list, which one do you think stands out as important for you?
Oh, crikey.
There's a lot
now
of
you're
them.
asking me. Oh, you've got me there, Gordon.
Do you want to get married again, Sam? Because you can now, and you can move house or go to the zoo.
Well, see, that one sounds really good because one of my kids is actually house hunting.
Oh, excellent.
And I've as the good supportive parent that I am, I've been kind of helping and, already kind of helped pack some of his stuff. This is one of the ones, there's only so much bad taste in music you can put up with, because he seems to decide that playing ABBA and Britney Spears is the way to go. So he's been torturing us all through lockdown. So yes,
What do you-
house move is
How,
good.
how do you feel, Sam? How do you feel about a little high street retail therapy?
I'm not one for shopping anyway.
No.
No, I'm not. I would rather go and spend a day in a library or a museum or something, or go a walk up the hills. I'm not one for shopping. Going a bit of retail therapy. It's quite funny, Gordon. That's one of my worst nightmares. If you ever want to torture me, that's what you do. You take me retail therapy. I'm normally standing outside with the guys.
Well, what about outdoor sports, Sam? Do you have a favourite outdoor sport that you would like to play?
Well, we go cycling quite a lot, and we go cycling's been one of our main things during lockdown.
It's become very popular, hasn't it?
Yeah, and the other one that we like to do is hill walking. So we're looking forward to getting back to doing hill walking. That's one of the things that we quite enjoy as a family. So in terms of competitive sports,
Yeah, you'll have to be careful, Sam. There's still a 5 mile limit on your radius of activity.
We've not done any at all. We've done none at all. And it's only been the kind of cycling we've been doing, but we're looking forward to when.
Sam, what about the subject of outdoor markets? This is one which I hadn't actually thought about until I saw this at the bottom of the report. Outdoor markets can reopen once guidance is implemented. I don't know if there are any outdoor markets near you.
Outdoor markets is my background.
Is it? My goodness.
And one of the things that I used to attend outdoor markets quite a lot as a stallholder.
Right.
And for many years. Outdoor markets, you've got plenty of space. The stalls are pretty much, and you've got a kind of barrier in between stalls if you wish.
Of course, farmers markets as well, Sam.
Yeah, they're quite. So that's one of the ones I was actually surprised to see closed down, because people are. There's quite a lot of space, especially depending where you are. But the stalls are quite spacious. So, and how you kind of design your own individual stall, you can keep it as safe as possible in terms of your social distancing. So for people that are professional stallholders, they know how to do that very well and protect themselves very well, because one of the things with outdoor markets and things, we've got to be able to know how to do that just to protect us from colds and things like that anyway. And also as well about keeping ourselves warm and all these kind of things. I no longer do outdoor markets due to the fact became a bit sensitive to the cold weather.
Okay, Sam.
It was one of those ones,
Sam,
out in the damp weather of Scotland.
Listen, if it's okay with you, Sam, I'll need to move on now.
No problem.
Okay, now I'm following new research showing that lower income households are twice as likely as richer ones to have increased their debts during the crisis. The SNP has renewed calls for the UK government to strengthen welfare protections, including rolling out an emergency basic payment immediately. The SNP's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary has said that research led by the Resolution Foundation, showing that lower income households are using savings and borrowing more, while richer families are saving because they're unable to eat out or travel, shows that the wealth gaps that existed before coronavirus have not only been exposed, but are now being exacerbated by the pandemic. The SNP has repeatedly called on the UK government to strengthen welfare protections to prevent people from falling into or further into debt due to the crisis by implementing an emergency basic payment, making universal credit advance payments non-repayable grants instead of loans, and uplifting the child element of universal credit and tax credit by £20 per week, increasing legacy benefits and scrapping the benefit cap. Now, Sam, surely this has got to be a good idea. The idea that that the poorest people are paying the highest cost for this lockdown. Surely they're entitled to something.
They are. They certainly are, because the thing is, it's savings, it's everything that they've went through, and even just kind of speaking to people, whether it's on social media, you hear about people struggling with their bills, and the most common bill that people have been kind of struggling with and deliberately forgetting is council tax. They need to do something. A universal basic income, would have solved this.
Yeah. They don't seem to be asking for that, Sam. They seem to be asking for a kind of temporary payment. This strikes me as being just a one-off at the moment.
There's got to be something, Gordon.
Yeah.
There's got to be something, because the thing is, again, low-income people, families and households, a lot of them are working from home. So again, there's an increase on electricity.
Of course.
Kids as well. Kids are having to use more electricity, more internet to do their schoolwork and things like that.
Of course.
There's got to be something. There's got to be.
Okay, well, Sam, listen, speaking of, working at home and being a mum, actually leads us quite nicely into our next item. 4 single mothers have secured victory over the government after the appeal court ruled that rigid universal credit payment rules that leave tens of thousands of working benefit claimants out of pocket were irrational and unlawful. The case revolved around the Department of Work and Pensions' refusal to change universal credit assessment period regulations, which have had the effect of penalising claimants whose salary is paid towards the end of a month, resulting in fluctuating levels of income. Danielle Johnson, a school catering assistant who brought the original case, has argued that the DWP's refusal to allow her to adjust the date of her universal credit assessment period meant that she was left about £500 worse off each year and was therefore subject to cash flow problems and put at risk of eviction. The court ruling last year found in favour of Johnson and the 3 other single mothers, concluding that it was odd in the extreme that the DWP was unwilling to modify universal credit arrangements, even when the claimants were perversely affected. Currently, around 85,000 claimants are estimated to be affected by the rules. Between them, the 4 had been forced into rent arrears and had borrowed money and used food banks to make ends meet. One of the mothers was so exasperated by the system that she gave up work to look for another job that had no clash between her pay date and the universal credit assessment period. But the universal credit system reads this as her having earned twice as much in one month and none in the next, meaning that her benefit payment amount fluctuates wildly and cancelling out her work allowance in several months, leaving her £500 a year worse off. Now, surely this has got to be a case of the ultimate job's worth story, this one, Sam. Refusing to move the date to allow somebody to take their payments. It's
crazy, but this is one of the things that single parents, whether it's single parent mums or single parent dads, have got to deal with all the time. And it's when universal credit came out, it was just, again, it's another part of society which is being penalised. As somebody that's a single parent mum, I refused to go into universal credit. I stayed with child tax credits, which is a bit more fairer. And you don't get penalised, because your income's taken over, the year.
Yes, I understand.
And even as a single parent mum, and many other single parent mums who I know who are self-employed, because there's a lot of single parent parents who are actually self-employed out there, which a lot of people don't realise.
Yes.
There is loads of them out there, and they all said the same. If they were going to go on to universal credits, they'd done their research, they found that they were going to be penalised for being a single parent, and they would end up with actually less money. But then again, we all know that universal credit is designed to penalise, it is designed to keep people in poverty. So I'm
you're right,
surprised.
Sam.
But well done to the 4 mums who took this to court. So proud of them. Well done, them.
What I hope it will result in, Sam, is the department actually changing their flexibility on dates, because all they're really asking for is for them to be a little bit flexible about the time at which they take their payments. It doesn't seem too much to ask, does it?
I know, it doesn't make sense. The thing is, Gordon, how much money is the DWP wasting with all these appeals, court cases, and everything else? And they must be spending more money on these things than they are actually paying out on welfare benefits.
Well, of course, the other thing, Sam, is you've got 85,000 people potentially in the same situation as this young woman, losing £500 per year. You multiply that by 85,000, that's an awful lot of money that people are losing.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, again, when you go to appeals and court cases, that's all coming out of the taxpayers' money. It's all coming out, that's more money that could be going into helping people, getting wasted in appeals, getting wasted in court cases. To me, it's just, they're just throwing good money away when it could be going to going to people that need it and helping those people.
Okay, Sam, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to our next story. And now, on Windrush Day, the SNP's Shadow Home Secretary has demanded that the Home Office ditches its hostile environment to respond to the Windrush lessons learned, review without delay and provide legal aid for Windrush victims. Joanna Cherry QC MP has called on the UK government to review all government policies where there is evidence that they impact adversely on Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, including the callous no recourse to public funds policy, following a CNN poll which showed a majority of Black Britons, 58%, believe that the Conservative Party is institutionally racist. The SNP has tabled amendments to the immigration bill going through Parliament, which are designed to roll back on the hostile environment. If the immigration bill is passed unamended, EEA nationals will face significantly increased risk of falling victim to the same hostile environment, with their free movement rights stripped away. Earlier this month, the Equality and Human Rights Commission's EHRC announced that it will investigate the Home Office policies that led up to the Windrush scandal and whether they complied with the Equality Act. This came after the former Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, said that the Home Office hadn't even started on delivering the cultural change that is required in light of the utterly damning Windrush Lessons Learned review. So Sam, here's another story of, I think it's got to be the ultimate story of government inflexibility and this ridiculous this ridiculous policy of being hostile to people coming to live here.
It's just appalling, Gordon. It really is appalling. I just don't understand it. I don't understand the mentality of it at all. But I seen the CNN poll today, and I'm not surprised. I actually would have expected to be a higher percentage believing that the Conservative Party is racist, but that's my only surprise.
Well,
it wasn't as high as what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's 58% of Black people think they're institutionally racist.
I thought it would have been higher than that. But no, I'm not surprised because, the way the Conservatives behave, they are very much institutionally racist. They don't like anyone who is not for the English way, white and Christian. If you're anything outside that box, and you don't, you're not pigeonholed into that box, then they don't really want to know, and they're not exactly for being flexible about it. And that was one thing about Brexit, made it very clear, and they homed in on that. And it's absolutely disgusting. It is absolutely appallingly disgusting. This is one of those ones where you want to rant and swear and things like that, and call them.
But it seems, the Windrush scandal itself, Sam, seems to have been a combination of, first of all, total ineptitude in destroying the documents of people who'd come into the country perfectly legally, and then throwing them out, which seemed to me to be callous, almost racism, to my way of thinking.
It's despicable. These are people who were welcomed here, and you see it happening all across the board. Windrush, you see it with the Gurkhas, you see it with so many different people who have came to Britain, and on the kind of invitation, and then once they've done what they've done, it's like you're no longer welcome here. Go
Thanks
away.
Thanks very much. Go back home.
Thanks very much. See you later. Bye. And it doesn't matter that their children and grandchildren are born here. They don't know anything. They don't. This is their life. This is their home. Yeah. And it's just, they're just made to feel so unwelcome and so unwanted. And it is disgusting. It's exploitation. It really is exploitation.
Well, of course, Sam, it's I'm going to move on now from this story to our next. Now, you might have thought that the COVID-19 virus had its time. Well, not so apparently. South Korea is currently battling a COVID-19 second wave. Health authorities in South Korea said that for the first time on Monday, it's in the midst of a second wave of novel coronavirus infections around Seoul, driven by small but persistent outbreaks stemming from a holiday in May. The Korea Centres for Disease Control and Prevention, the KCDC, had previously said that South Korea's first wave had never really ended. But on Monday, KCDC Director Jong Young-kyung said that it had become clear that a holiday weekend in early May marked the beginning of a new wave of infections, focused on the densely populated Greater Seoul area, which had previously seen few cases. At the end of February, South Korea reported that the peak of more than 900 cases in one day in the largest outbreak of coronavirus outside China. An intensive tracking and testing campaign reduced the numbers to single digits by late April. But just as the country announced that it would be easing social distancing guidelines in early May, new cases spiked, driven in part by infections among young people who had visited nightclubs and bars in Seoul over the holiday weekend. As of midnight on Sunday, South Korea reported 17 new coronavirus cases. The first time in nearly a month that the daily new cases had dropped below 20. It was a drop from the 48 and 67 cases reported in the previous 2 days. South Korea has reported a total of 12,438 cases with 280 deaths. So Sam, it seems that in South Korea at least, they haven't seen the last of this virus. And I'm just beginning to think that people in the UK are beginning to fall into a false sense of security. What do you think?
I agree with you, Gordon, in that I think they are falling into a false sense of security. I don't think we're going to get completely away from this virus that easy. The way it moves around and transmits, people are still very much, and again, that comes down to the way it was handled at the beginning with the UK government, where it was like a kind of joke and it wasn't really that serious. And we still have an element in the population who still believe that. So I can see us having another wave again, but who's to say? We'll just need to wait and see. But it's a shame with South Korea because they had been dealing with it quite well. And to see them, it just goes to show that how easy it can take hold again.
Yeah, what I was going to say, Sam, is South Korea were held up as a good example of how testing and tracing can bring the numbers down very quickly, and they did. But it seems now that other outbreaks have sprung up elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame because South Korea just seemed to have their finger on the button, so to speak. They seem to be away, it was very much, well, if they can do it, we can do it. So it just goes to show you how quickly it can take hold and how quickly you can lose control. Well, I think, to be honest, I think the virus is going to be around for quite a wee while. I don't think it's just going to disappear overnight. And I think we're going to have to learn different ways of living with it. And
well, when the COVID virus was first discovered, I did some research on the original influenza pandemic of 1918. And when I researched that, I discovered to my horror that the second wave of that pandemic was 5 times the size of the original wave. And that is a really scary thought.
Because I was like you, I kind of looked into the Spanish influenza, and it was, which is quite scary. And to think as well, even then, that wasn't, not all the figures were recorded, so it was probably larger than what the official.
Well, what was interesting, Sam, was remember what you were saying about the virus being around for a while to come. Well, the 1918 virus apparently has now become part of what we call winter flu. And we're still living with it, interestingly. After all these years, we're still there.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. People don't realise that when they talk about the Spanish influenza, they think it's gone and they don't realise that That's what we live
Yeah.
with.
Listen, Sam, I'm
every
going to
year.
move on a little bit further into the COVID-19 story a bit more. And this time in New Zealand. New Zealand is introducing strict measures to strengthen its border as more citizens access increased flights to come home. Now, while the world enters this dangerous new phase, we remain in a phase of border containment, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has said. The government renewed its health order mandating 14 days of quarantine, which also included a new measure to ensure that people arriving in New Zealand must have a negative COVID-19 test before they leave quarantine, and they may also be required to take multiple tests. Ardern said that New Zealand would extend the ban on cruise ships beyond the 30th of June. Exceptions will be made for cargo ships to load and unload and for fishing vessels. But any ship crew arriving in New Zealand would need to spend 14 days in quarantine if they hadn't been on the vessel for 28 days prior to it docking. She said the jump in cases was due to more New Zealanders coming home, with a doubling of people in the last month. And this was because the world had started to open up with more flights becoming available. New Zealand was also seeing more flights coming from parts of the world which have more COVID-19 cases. New Zealand has now 9 active cases of COVID-19 as more people start arriving into the country from overseas. The government came under increasing pressure in the last week over the management of quarantine and managed isolation facilities after 2 women entered the country from the United Kingdom and were allowed to travel to Wellington to visit a dying relative and later then tested positive for COVID-19. So in the same vein, Sam, as we were just talking about, the virus is obviously not gone from New Zealand either, despite them having almost a clean sheet for quite a long time there.
I know, it's a shame, isn't it? They were doing so well, but I don't blame the Prime Minister for bringing these new tougher measures in. And that's the thing is, we've been an island, so they can do that, and
of course
they are able
have,
to do that.
And of course they have full control of their borders, Sam.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, and of course they are allowed to control their own borders.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say as well. That's something, we're on the same wavelength tonight, Gordon.
Okay, good.
But that's something the UK government should have done at the beginning. And we would have seen completely different numbers. The economy would have probably been a lot healthier as well if we had just, took the plunge, been a bit stricter at the beginning, and we would be coming out of it at the other end now, making the borders closed and quarantine things, now is a bit late.
Indeed.
But we've had the conversations loads of times.
Oh, and they're still happening.
I feel sorry for New Zealand, but I can understand why they have went and took those measures.
Of course, there's still problems for Scotland because many people in England have come out of lockdown before us, and of course are travelling to Scotland now because they feel that the danger is over. And of course, we can't really prevent them from crossing our border to travel into Scotland.
If they're not coming over by motorhomes and caravans and cars, they're coming up through aeroplane. I don't know if you've noticed, Gordon, I mean, all through lockdown, one of the things we were quite aware of was how quiet the skies were.
Indeed,
it was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was great, and we done, well, not so much tonight or anything because of the weather, but we done quite a lot of stargazing and satellite.
It's been terrific for astronomy, Sam. Yep.
It's been great, and the fact that there's no planes in the sky. But seeing the last week, see at night, I've heard more planes, and because we've not heard them for so long, it's very, they seem very loud. You realise how loud they are.
Yeah, I think we don't
does that
realise.
make sense?
Yeah, we don't realise how used we are to the constant racket and pollution of aircraft flying overhead.
My goodness. Yeah, that's quite noisy. I didn't realise they were so noisy.
Well, I have the misfortune, Sam, to live directly under the glide slope for the northern approach to Glasgow Airport. So I feel your pain. Anyway, I'm going to move on. Talking of pain, actually, brings me very nicely to this next story. Dental practices can resume seeing NHS patients in need of urgent care from today, the 22nd of June. Dentists have received guidance and personal protective equipment to enable them to provide urgent treatments that do not create an aerosol under the NHS Scotland Remobilisation Plan. This work will be aligned to the decision-making process set out in the framework for resumption of NHS services. Chief Dental Officer Tom Ferris has said, dental practices will be able to see NHS patients who are in need of urgent care for face-to-face consultation, using procedures which limit the risk of the spread of coronavirus, such as non-aerosol generating procedures. This will mean up to an additional 10,000 appointment slots will be available each day across Scotland. Now that means, I think, Sam, the one thing that everybody hates the most about the dentist, the drill, will probably not be getting used because it tends to spray water and aerosols
yeah, it
up.
does. I know.
And that
I know,
horrible
but
noise we all
there's nothing
hate.
worse though than having toothache, Gordon. You know, it's one of those ones where you hate the dentist, you're terrified of it, but
you
know
need
it's
it.
a necessary evil because toothache is unbearable. So. Yeah, but it's good to see the dentists are back up and running. But yeah,
Of course, emergency care has been available all throughout the lockdown on a limited basis for those in pain, mainly, I think.
Oh,
but this,
it gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about the drill, Gordon.
well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody who is a dentist recently, and he was telling me that a lot of private practice dentists were worried that they were going to go out of business unless they got started working fairly soon. Now, this seems partially, at least, to be a timely response to that. Do you think the government has got this right, Sam, about the way they're going about it?
With dentists, it's healthcare, isn't it? It's about healthcare and about hygiene because the thing is, if you don't have access to the dentist, it's like going to an optician and a doctor. It is so important because there's so many things that they can spot long before that you may spot, or if there's the dentists need to be opened, and I can understand why this just emergency healthcare, but it's so vital for these checkups and the oral hygiene because there is so many people that end up with mouth cancer, and other health problems.
Yeah, they can't afford to miss something like that.
And they need to be opened back up. They really do. And it's the same with opticians. Again, there's so many health issues that can only be spotted if you go and get an eye test that you may not spot otherwise.
Well, that's the thing, of course, ophthalmology, I think, is restarting as well. Now, it's not quite the same as going to the opticians, I believe, because ophthalmology is usually in a hospital.
I'm glad you can say that, because I can't, Gordon. That's how I just said
and
opticians.
Of course but of course it's only... Of course, it's only essential optometry, so I'm thinking about people who maybe have an eye disease or have had an operation and they need that.
When my youngest goes to appointments to these people, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. He's got to go because he's got I don't know if you've ever noticed, wee Christopher wears glasses. And the reason he wears glasses, he's got a really, really bad squint in his eye. And he's got to go on a very regular basis because what happens is he can see double and all these other things, which is quite interesting, especially when he attempts to jump over a burn or a stream and misjudges and ends up in the middle of the burn or the stream. We've had, we've had many incidents like that with Christopher because
Sam,
of his eyesight. But the thing is, at the moment, all his appointments have been cancelled due to COVID. But we've got his eyes under control at the moment, there's a lot of things out there that people are, more urgent. That they really do need to be back seeing these specialists.
And this is obviously part of the unlocking of the lockdown, so that people who need that care now even though they
Yeah.
maybe weren't acute patients, they're now needing it, that
Yeah.
they're now going to get it. And of course, these 10,000 dental appointment slots per day now being made available, that should
Yeah.
go to some degree, to get down the big queue, the waiting list of
Yeah.
backlog of work, I suppose, for dentists in Scotland.
Definitely.
Okay. Anyway, listen, we're going to move on to our final story of this evening. And this actually is not very far from where I live, strangely enough. Now, the Scottish Water is leaping into action in Stirlingshire this summer with a £100,000 project to help improve the water environment for fish at Loch Venator Reservoir. Work will begin on, I was going to say it will begin on Monday. It is Monday. It will begin today, Monday the 22nd of June at the Freshwater Reservoir, which is situated in the heart of the Trossachs between Callander and the Brig o' Turk. The loch is home to salmon and sea trout, which migrate upriver from the sea at the Forth estuary to spawn, and it is a popular location for fishing. As a part of the project, timber baffles are being installed in the spill channel at the reservoir's dam, in line with the north channel of the East Govan River. This enhancement will complement other existing Victorian fish paths in the south channel. The baffles will break up the water flow in the spill channel and assist the fish in leaping across the dam spillway on their journey upstream from the River Teith to reproduce. The project is expected to take around 3 weeks for completion. So I dare say, Sam, that both the fish themselves, if they knew about this, would be delighted that they're going to be able to get to their mating grounds and their spawning grounds. And I dare say that the human fishermen waiting there to catch them might be just as pleased about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure the salmon would be delighted that their lives getting made a wee bit easier for them, because, oh crikey, the journey they make, if you actually kind of follow and you watch how the salmon migrate and go to their spawning ground, they go through a lot. My goodness,
They have to go, yeah.
Yeah, they've got so many hurdles, including fishermen, they need to get by. So yeah, why not? I mean, this is one of these good news stories, isn't it?
You've got to admire the salmon's amazing tenacity that it will leap up such enormous barriers.
And if you ever go to any of the kind of, is it the salmon steps or leaps and things like that?
Yeah, there's one in Mulgai actually near where I live. There's a salmon ladder.
Them, it's amazing. It's amazing to watch. It's quite interesting.
But it's the fact that they're swimming against the river upstream as well. I mean, it must take
It's just, and the thing is,
chucking yourself up a waterfall is an incredible thing to do for any animal.
It's just, you just think of the strength behind them to do that. It's just amazing. But no, as I say, they've got many hurdles. They've got the herring, they've got fishermen, they've got also,
plus,
looking to catch them,
people illegally poaching them and netting them. And also, I guess, pollution in the water and plastics in the sea.
I know, and it's just like, what they deal with, we don't appreciate, what these fish actually go through. I mean, I could sit here all night and blather about fish and salmon, Gordon.
But listen, Sam, the good news is
what they go through.
Well, the good news is that our fishy friends have only got 3 weeks to wait for this helpful piece of engineering to be completed. Anyway, that's just about.
Actually quite quick, isn't it?
It is pretty quick, yeah. I don't know who they gave the contract to, but it's pretty good. That's Scottish Water or Waterways, I think, must have done.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. Normally you expect.
Apparently it's George Leslie. I've just been told it's George Leslie, the contractor.
Well, that's quite impressive.
So there you go.
We'll need to maybe go there and have a wee look once it's finished.
Well, next time I'm up at Loch Venator, I'm going to go and have a look and see how well the salmon are getting on up there, Sam.
Yeah, you should take a wee film of it, Gordon.
Yeah. I will. I'll do that. Okay, Sam, well, we have reached the end of our allotted time this evening. And of course, it's my duty at this time of night to ask you to help Broadcasting Scotland. If you enjoy our programmes and you would like to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, and of course, we need your donations and we need your support more than ever at the moment at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. You can do that by following the instructions on your screen now by going to www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register. And by all means, please tell your friends about us and share as much as possible. Follow us on Twitter too. That's it from me, Gordon Ross, in the studio tonight, and very special thanks to my guest, Sam Payton, and hopefully we will both see you again on Thursday night when I'm back in the studio. But from all of us here at Broadcasting Scotland, a very good night to you.
Bye.
Bye.